I will call this meeting to order. We'll start with the invocation. And tonight we'll pray for our first responders and our men and women overseas in these very difficult times. We're there with COVID. The first responders are doctors, our nurses, our people like that are just stellar citizens. And thank God that they are there for us as we move forward, and take care of them, and each one of the people on the council commission, and help us to do the work of the citizens of Canby. In your name, amen. And we'll do a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. So, Lainey, do we have any citizens that you know of that are online with us?
No, we do not.
Okay. Then we have the Planning Commission minutes for January 11th. I assume everybody has had a chance to review those. And so I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Mr. Chair, this is Jeff. I'd like to suggest a change to the minutes.
Okay.
In the minutes under questions, it says Commissioner Mills did not like the use of acronyms that were not defined in the staff report. And I guess that's accurate. I guess what I had hoped to say, perhaps not as diplomatically as it came out, was that I would request that staff always try to define the first use of an acronym in a document. And I think that's what they failed to do in this document. So I'm not sure, Lainey, if that needs a change or not. I'm willing to vote for the minutes as written, but that a change there would be nice.
Okay, noted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have a second with noting that change? Come on.
Somebody.
Have a second here.
I'll second. This is Commissioner Hutchinson.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. We'll move on. Lainey, new business?
I think we need a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Getting too casual here. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you, Jeff. Lainey, any new business?
No, none.
Okay. Well, we'll move on to the public hearing. And today we will, the first one is consider a request to build a 2-story, 56,000 square foot assisted living facility building with 102 units with a memory care endorsement and 8 cottages on site for independent living that will be in separate 1-story, 700 square foot duplexes at the corner of 13th and Ivy. That's DR 20-03 CUP 20-02 memory care facility. That has we've been requested that hearing be continued to February 22nd. So the next meeting. So we will not be hearing that tonight. That's correct, right, Lainey?
Yes, it is. And I'm not sure, but our staff, Brianna, is here tonight if she would like to speak to that.
Okay.
I am here. I don't have anything specific to say. It's just the applicants wanted a little more time to get their proposal together. So we're expecting a good project and we'll see it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on that, John?
Sure.
Is that on the east or west side of Ivy?
It is the southeast corner.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So that's across from Hope Village.
Correct.
Okay. That answer your question, Larry?
Yes, I figured that's where it was at. I just wanted to be sure.
Okay. And Brianna, that is not associated with Hope Village, is it?
No, it's not.
Separate thing. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. The next thing, we will consider a request to subdivide 3 parcels consisting of approximately 4.59 acres into 44 separate legal lots located on North Redwood Street. SUB 20-04 Redwood Landing 3 subdivision. This matter before us requires public hearings. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or other land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest, please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Okay. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Okay. The hearing will be conducted as follows. First, we'll have the staff report and questions, if any, by us. Then I will open the public hearing for testimony. First will be the applicant, not more than 5 minutes. Other proponents, not more than 5 minutes. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes. And rebuttal by the applicant, not more than 10 minutes. At that time, we will close the public hearing and we'll have questions by us if we have any. And then we'll discuss the issue and a decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date that you will receive. Any questions? Okay. So who's going to conduct the staff report? Laney?
That's going to be me, Eric Forcell.
Okay, Eric?
I just wanted to bring one item back. I think it does. I'm pretty sure someone would need to make a motion and vote on a continuance for an item, for the memory care item.
Oh, we have to. Can we circle around and do that?
Yeah.
After the other report.
Sure.
Okay, let's move ahead and then we will circle back on that.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Let me know if you can see it, please.
I can see a big O back there.
Yeah. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see you. This
Yes.
is boat right.
Okay. So this is Redwood Landing 3. It's a subdivision proposal. The city file is sub 20-04. If you recall, not too long ago, we were here for a public meeting on Redwood Landing 2, which is directly north of this property. This is the third iteration of Redwood Landing 3. The existing site has physical addresses of 1176, 1212, and 1234 North Redwood Street. It's identified on the Clackamas County Assessor's Map as tax lots 300, 301, and 302 on Assessor's Map 31E, 34B. The site in aggregate, which is 3 tax lots, is approximately 4.59 acres. It does contain some existing dwellings and accessory structures commonly associated with residential property. Some of the existing dwellings will be removed as part of the development proposal, and one is proposed to remain. The area itself is zoned R1.5 medium density residential and also R2 high density
Tell
residential.
Sarah I'm in a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
She's calling me.
If you look on the zoning map to the right, you can see the 2 tax lots that are zoned R1.5, and then the orange color towards the bottom is the R2 portion. And it appears that the entirety or aggregate of the property consists of portions of Lot 93 of Canby Gardens subdivision, which is sufficient for a legal lot determination in order to proceed with a subdivision. So I'm going to speak a little bit towards the subject property's existing conditions. Like I had mentioned, there are 3 existing dwellings. Structures on tax lots 301 and 302 are to be demolished. The remaining dwelling will remain on tax lot 300. It then would be subject to the non-conforming use criteria, which are found in Canby Municipal Code 16.52, and that is for non-conforming uses and structures. It'll be a little bit different because the bounds of the property will change, but because it's a single family dwelling in an R2 zone, it's considered a non-conforming use today. It'll just get a little bit different if this subdivision were to be approved. The approximately 4.5-ish acre site is generally flat, and it slopes slightly downward to the eastern portion of the property closer to the Willow Creek wetland drainage area. It's not directly adjacent to it, but generally the topography slopes downward and to the east. Adjacent properties and uses and zoning to the north is Redwood Landing Phase 2, which was R1.5, and that was approved last year. To the west is North Redwood Street, and across that right of way is R1 subdivided land, fairly parcelized. To the south is a R2 zone property. That's the Garden Crossing subdivision. And then to the east is a RRFF5 parcel that is in Clackamas County jurisdiction, but it's inside the city's UGB. RRF5 is rural residential farm forest 5-acre minimum parcel size. That property is in the North Redwood Development Concept Plan area, but has not been annexed. So here's some aerial imagery of the properties with some contour maps. So you can see there's a little bit of a plateau in the center east part, and then it slopes downward towards the east, towards that wetland drainage area and the railroad and Highway 99. And then to the north is Redwood Landing 2, to the west, North Redwood Street, and to the south is Garden Crossing. So the applicant's proposal today for you to deliberate upon is that the applicant is requesting approval to subdivide tax lots 300, 301, and 302 on Clackamas County Assessor's Map 31E, 34B into 4 discrete legal lots. The mixtures of the lots is proposed to contain 11 single-family detached dwellings, 32 single-family attached dwellings, and 1 existing oversized lot, which will remain with the single-family dwelling and be subject to non-conforming use standards. All required improvements, including the local street infrastructure, sidewalks, power, water, and sewer, will be required and built as part of the proposal. And then frontage improvements along North Redwood Street as required by Clackamas County. In many ways, this is very similar to North Redwood too, just a bit of a different mix of housing types. So for your, for a frame of reference, again, this is one of the, I guess there's a decent amount of property that's still left, but one of the later portions of North Redwood Development Concept Plan area to be developed. I included the plan as an attachment. It's just useful for background and frame of reference to understand how we got here and what's kind of guiding the development. On the left-hand side of the screen is a little bit overlay box there that says sub 2004, and that's the general area of where this development is proposed. And then on the right, the same thing. That's the development concept plan map with the development area roughly shaded over. This is the applicant's preliminary plan. You'll notice lots 1 through 11 plus 23 are going to be the R1.5 single family detached dwellings. Lot 44 is the existing dwelling that's going to remain. And then you can see that North Sycamore Street, which is the neighborhood route that is pretty integral to the development concept plan, is planned to be continued through the site. And it will connect with North Redwood Landing 2 to the north, which is getting closer to providing the whole neighborhood route from north to south throughout the concept plan area. So that's an important component. The attached dwellings are to the south on the map. And you can see them laid out there. There's private streets, which are going to be denoted as tracts to access those properties. So there are a number of criteria that are reviewed as part of a subdivision approval. In this instance, all of the typical review standards apply: general provisions, off-street parking. The plan districts is the North Redwood Development Concept Plan itself, the R1.5 and R2 zones because of the different types of zoning in the project area. Non-conforming uses for that existing parcel that will remain with the dwelling. Land divisions, subdivisions, applications, and design standards, the street alignments, and then basically the procedural criteria for this type of land use application. So I wanted to touch briefly on the split zone concept. And I think the applicant does a pretty good job of addressing this issue. We do have language in our code and the general standards that speaks to how lots should be apportioned and how zoning should be dealt with should they be split zoned. And the reality is how this shakes out is it largely is the same area, and is not really inconsistent with what's there versus what's proposed. So I'm going to show you a bunch of maps that kind of display that point. So I'll go back. That's the existing zoning. R1.5 is the yellow. R2 is the orange. R1.5 medium density, R2 high density. That's the zoning over the aerial overlay. And this is the zoning proposed by the applicant. The thing that is different between those images is the street is a big part of it, and aligning the street. I think staff generally agreed with how the connector of the street and the overall layout of the lots seems to conform with how the zoning boundary should land. I don't think there's any issue there, but I just wanted to show you some images that I think are worth 1,000 words to how we got there. Another item that I know in recent planning commission meetings I've had with you all are the traffic study components. Staff has worked a little more closely with DKS, our traffic consultant. I'm getting some of these materials a little bit easier to review. And one component was creating an executive summary of the findings. And this is the summary. I can go through it. Another component was improving the background data, which is one of the items that are listed here. But DKS has added a 1% compound annual growth rate that reflects regional trip growth that wasn't being captured in previous traffic studies. And I think that's probably pretty close to par with reality. And then also we've been trying to keep the current background data of approved projects or approved trips and inputting that data into the traffic studies. And some of this was from you all as the planning commission wanting to see the findings a little more clearly and ensuring that the information that you're seeing is pretty current and accurate. So the summary of the findings found that the two intersections that were analyzed did not warrant any changes or improvements. There were no major capacity issues that were identified. There would be generally 31 a.m. peak hour trips, 42 peak hour p.m. trips, and a total of 396 daily trips. I mentioned that trips from the approved but not fully occupied developments were added to the roadways. So giving you a better account for how traffic is flowing through the study area. And then the traffic consultants did not identify any safety issues for this project. So basically what this means is there was no findings or determinations stating that a improvement such as like signaling or other improvement would be necessitated by this project. Hopefully the planning commission finds this useful. If we do, I would try to have these executive summaries and keep the data pretty current for future items that we bring to planning commission consideration. So as far as staff findings, Staff found that the proposed subdivision was largely consistent with the North Redwood Development Concept Plan, that the subdivision was consistent with the applicable versions of the zoning code and largely conformed to the various specific criteria therein that were listed in the staff report. 70 plus findings, I think. That the public and private infrastructure can meet the design standards with coordination from the City Public Works Department and Canby Fire District. The public and private infrastructure can be extended, it's available, and can be built out, which is an important finding for developing a subdivision. That the comprehensive plan is generally in support of the overall goals of providing additional housing in the city and housing types, which is what this project is proposing. And then that the transportation study adequately evaluates the project and its potential impacts. So there are some items that I included in here as special conditions. And these are conditions that the Planning Commission could impose if they found that they were warranted. One is the future extension of streets. And I'll read this out for you and I'll explain why I included it. Where a subdivision adjoins unplatted acreage streets, which in the opinion of the commission should be continued in the event of a subdivision of the acreage, will be required to be provided through the boundary lines of the tract. There is a road. I'm going to go back real quick. There's a cul-de-sac road here that is included in the overall development concept plan. The applicant didn't include it and gave some justification for why. Seems reasonable. I'm not an engineer or a surveyor, but could the road be built out? Maybe. But the other real important part about the development concept plan is it does provide flexibility for individual development. It didn't envision that this map would be built as a carbon copy to the development. Staff didn't include a condition that suggested the Planning Commission should address this, but I just wanted the commission to be aware that if that's something they wanted to investigate further, that it is within your purview. But again, staff didn't recommend that condition. The other aspect is some or all of the cul-de-sac area is not on the subject property. And it looks like there might be some topography issues there for the actual construction and coordination with the sewer area. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And then we also have, the Planning Commission can also request or require that any alternative permeable surfaces that address lot coverage shall meet the approval of the Public Works Department. And the reason that I highlighted this one is that sometimes with the R2 zone and the impermeable surface requirements of 70%, that applicants run into some difficulties with meeting that requirement. And it didn't seem to be that the case in this proposal, although a lot of this will happen at the building permit stage. It is an option for the Planning Commission to basically reinforce the fact that if the applicant is going to propose permeable surfacing to meet the 70% impervious surface standards, that needs to be approved by the Public Works Department. So little unique conditions. Again, staff didn't recommend that those be included, but they're there for your deliberation. We did receive some comments from agencies. The city engineer provided comments on street and typical public infrastructure requirements and coordination. Would be very similar to Redwood Landing 2. Canby Fire District did submit comments regarding the access ways. So those are going to be the tracks that serve the private, those private roads to the attached homes. Direct Links provided some comments on coordination for trenching and providing services. And Clackamas County Transportation Planning provided a pretty detailed account of suggested conditions in order to meet the roadway standards and improvements required with the North Redwood frontage that is adjacent to this subdivision. As far as public comments, staff is not aware or has not received any public comments on this proposal to date. So with all of that being said, based on the application submitted, the facts, findings, and conclusions of the staff report, planning staff recommends that the Planning Commission move to approve application sub 2004, subject to the identified conditions of approval. With that, I will conclude my testimony, and I'm able to answer any questions as they arise.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions from commissioners? Start with you, Jeff. Do you have any?
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions, but I guess I'll start with, first off, I want to compliment staff on the great quality of this report. It was well structured and I won't say easy to get through, but they made it as easy as it was possible to get through it. So compliments to the good staff work here. I guess I'd like to start by looking at conditions of approval as they're currently drafted on page 35 of 143, general process / informational. This is where I think Eric just summarized some of the things they're concerned about. And the wording of these conditions of approval to me means, and this is a question to you, Eric, they're not really conditions of approval. They're kind of questions for us to consider whether we want to create conditions of approval. Is that a fair statement, or what would be more correct?
I think you're pretty right on there. The reason I included them, and the way I've heard these described in other jurisdictions as informational conditions, meaning they're not strict requirements, but they're items that are kind of word of the wise. And the way that it's written in our code appears to say that the Planning Commission at a deliberation point could impose these conditions.
And that point would be now, right? I mean, we would, in order to approve this, I mean, our point of input at this point is prior to approval, correct?
Correct. So you could decide that these conditions appear to be necessary, or decide that they do not seem necessary.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You said you had more than one question, Jeff?
Yeah. I guess I wanted to ask staff about the I'm going to use the term turnarounds on the tracks, the access private drives or tracks. Mm-hmm. The turnarounds that are used there are kind of an L-shaped turnaround, and I haven't been on these many PUD approvals. Eric, my question would be, is that a common configuration for a turnaround?
They're fairly common. Those are called, the colloquial term is a hammerhead turnaround. Okay. Regardless, so the unique aspect, or one of the unique aspects of the city, is that it doesn't have the fire department incorporated within its own city structure. So the Canby Fire District is its own entity. But in order for that, the developer to have access to fire life safety, they would need to work with Canby Fire to their satisfaction on those hammerhead turnarounds or any other requirements. And we would
Okay.
expect that as an approval condition for the subdivision.
Okay, thank you, Eric. I guess, Mr. Chair, a lot of my questions do revolve around these private tracks. And so with that, that is accepted. I guess I wanted to make sure that I understood that these private tracks would all be red curb. There'd be no parking on any of these private tracks, on any of these private streets, no parking. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner Mills. The comments that I received from Canby Fire stated none of the travel surface to the various lots would be allowed for parking. They'd be red curbed, like you said,
Right.
parking.
Go ahead, sorry. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry, I interrupted you.
They are, so my knowledge, having worked with Canby Fire on access quite a bit now since I've worked with Canby, is that 26 feet is the magic number for their trucks and travel surface width. So as of right now, that's what they have, which is I don't want to speak for Canby Fire, but my experience shows me that that's sufficient for them if there's no parking and there's adequate turnarounds, which it appears those hammerheads accomplish.
Okay, Eric, that answers my question, but it leads me to my next question. And that is, as I look at this, I'm interpreting these condos as being single width driveways with one car garages. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. But what I'm wondering is there a need for additional parking in this development for visitors?
So, yeah, and part of the challenge here for this project is that at the subdivision phase, it is fairly conceptual. And what will happen is at the building permit phase, we're going to be reviewing these to see if it's sufficient parking will be allowed as part of the projects as they come in individually.
And you're correct. Go ahead.
So it's not, I don't want to say we're kicking the can down the road, but it's hard to know for certain until the applicant comes in to construct these structures, whether and how they're going to meet the parking. We're not going to allow them to not provide sufficient parking barring some kind of land use application. So,
Well, I guess as I look at this, I'm wondering what magic they're going to work to come up with parking. They've got every square inch of this parcel pretty well spoken for. There's a couple of landscape strips there that you might be able to stick some parking spaces along Sycamore. But you've answered my question there. Two more questions, and then I'll get this back to the chair for some other folks to have input. One is the access to lot 100 that the staff has pointed out may be desirable for access to future development east of this development. Is that going to be off Sycamore, off of North Sycamore Street? Is that what we're talking about?
So are you talking about the cul-de-sac that I had mentioned?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I spoke with other staff about this, and there are two kind of important concepts as part of this whole North Redwood development area. One was that North Sycamore, this neighborhood route, is not off. It cannot come off the table. So that has to be part of the project, which this is a continuation of that, which I think is good. And then, so for the cul-de-sac, the plan does pretty explicitly say that the plan's creators recognize that when a development comes in, that individual plans might change and that they may not be consistent with that exact map. which is, let me just for reference. That exact map is not necessarily going to be a carbon copy of what ends up being developed. So I saw that, and I had some questions about it. The applicant does make an argument. Maybe I'll let them speak to that during their turn about why they think it's not a great location for it. They indicated some topography and sewer pumping issues. The other part is that a significant portion of it isn't on the actual subject property's bounds. So what would happen is we would be creating a stub to a cul-de-sac.
Right.
I'm not sure what the value, I don't know if there's a ton of value in that for the city and for the developer. So that, that's why I brought this up in those special conditions. I wanted you all to be aware of that component, but having bounced it off the planning director and the senior planner, we didn't think it was an integral component of the North Redwood Development Concept Area Plan, and that's why we didn't recommend it as a condition of approval.
So my concern is that I would hate to see a development occur in a manner that prevents us from developing the remaining land that is, I guess within the urban growth boundary and planned for residential use. A portion of it is. I would like to make sure that whatever we do, we don't preclude development of that land for residential. I understand it's not all for residential, but it looks like a portion of it is planned for that.
Yeah, so and that's a good point. That collector road, Sycamore, does extend through North Redwood 2 to the north. And then the other component that's mostly built in North Redwood 1 area is moving south. And the current trajectory of those are going to basically intersect in that area, in that tax lot, which would provide physical and real access to the property. So the other thing that's tricky about this is that some of this hinges on each individual property owner wanting to annex and develop. And I guess it's from what I understand, these people in particular are not interested in that at this point in time. So it's likely will stay in the county, at least for the short term. But I do think there will be physical access, which will allow portions of that property that aren't inside of the wetland protected area to be developed for single family or other types of housing types.
Understood, Eric. I guess my only comment to that would be that, we should not be thinking totally short term, and I know you're not, because if current ownership is not interested, that doesn't mean 10 years from now, 15 years from now, which we need to be thinking about, I just want to make sure we're not doing anything to paint ourselves into a corner. And it sounds like we're not. So I guess I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It makes sense to ensure that this property doesn't become isolated or cut off so that it then no longer can be developed. And then also to your point, the ownership may change tomorrow or in a couple of years, and that would all be different. So I think we are, to the best of our ability within the confines of the plan, this concept plan and the code, trying to be forward thinking about the remaining parcels in this plan area.
Eric, I've got to give the other people on the commission a chance to speak, so I'm going to give it back. But before I do, I want to say one last thing. Thank you very much for the facilitating the executive summary and the traffic study. Greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Jennifer, do you have some questions or comments for Eric?
No, I think that the ones I was going to ask Jeff already addressed.
He has a tendency to do that, doesn't he?
Yep, I think that's good that you have him go first.
Yes.
Sorry.
I do.
But I did want to say, Eric, this was a really good job. And I too liked the summary for the traffic study. It really makes it, I think it decreases the additional number of questions and meandering that our conversations sometimes take during this meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner Hutchinson, do you have some questions for Eric?
I don't believe so. Thank you, though.
Okay. Commissioner Boatright.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. I just have one observation and it goes back to what Commissioner Mills was referring to on the parking for the condominiums. It occurs to me that the plans of the developer are going to clash at some point with reality in terms of the number of parking spaces that they are proposing. I don't think that I just don't think it's an adequate or realistic projection. Having had a family member live in the Redwood development too, it always seemed to me that parking was people were parking where they shouldn't be parking, and that caused some real problems. And I just wanted to make that observation. Any other questions for Eric? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Jeff again. I'm going to ask for a couple more minutes if I can. And
You bet.
First, I guess I wanted to support your comment about the parking plan and the unrealistic expectation that they're putting on this patch of land with the number of units in the R2. I guess I feel the same way. So I know if we kick this can down the road, we're still basically going to approve a PUD with however many lots it has on it. And then their challenge will be to try to achieve that and do all the other things. I guess we can leave it with a number of units. Having said that, though, I want to throw three more things out, and I'll get them out as quickly as I can. One is solar easements. I think staff has asked us about that in one of their informational conditions, and I would support requiring or strongly encouraging solar easements in the development, especially given the density we're trying for here. I'm not sure if it's possible or not, but I think it ought to be something we're encouraging. The other one is I'm going to point out something. The standards as we have them now, and Eric, I want to defer to you a little bit for for townhouse style constructions of 6 or more units. Where possible, we're supposed to encourage or require, probably not require, installation of rear access, be it an alley or a walkway. And that is not provided for on the 1-6 building unit. I'd also argue a concern for the 5 building unit on the east side. And to me, it's not an aesthetic, it's a safety issue. And I'm kind of disappointed that Canby Fire isn't jumping in here too. Wondering how you address a fire at the back of the condos in the middle of these developments. For example, a barbecue fire, explosion of a fire on a propane tank. Having personally experienced one of those, it's very frightening and it's very localized, and I wonder how you get to it. So I'm not sure I agree with staff's, I guess, agreement that rear access is not required or advisable. I think it's both. I think it's certainly advisable. I don't know that we can require it. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Jeff. Eric, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I do. So you are correct, Commissioner Mills, about the alleyway, which for 6 or more units is, and that this is another one of those items in our code that is basically a little fluffy. It does, it says some suggested or may be required. It doesn't, it fence sits rather than says 6 or more units will require an alley. My thought process on this was that if Canby Fire is comfortable with the drive aisles as they are, that an alleyway wouldn't be required. Again, you know, that is within the purview of the Planning Commission. And I think you did pick out one of the standards in the design criteria that could be applied. For staff's review, again, I kind of defer to Canby Fire District. It appears that their standards have been beefing up on the last couple of pre-application conferences I've done with them. They're requesting wider paved surface areas. Apparently they have some new large fire truck that some type of ladder truck that pretty much can handle any kind of structure fire in Canby. So that's somewhat reassuring to me when I was reviewing this, and that's why I didn't explicitly condition that in the staff report.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay. Any other questions for staff from other commissioners at this time? Okay, let's move along to the proponent. And bear with me for just a minute. Now it is. Couldn't find where I wanted here. White, the applicant. So, who is speaking for the applicant? Laney?
That'll be me, Rick Gibbons, planning consultant.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair Savory and Commissioners. My name is Rick Gibbons. I'm a planning consultant speaking for the applicants tonight. I know that you said at the beginning of the meeting that I'd have 5 minutes for my presentation, and there have been a lot of questions asked here tonight that are probably going to need a little more time than that to answer them adequately. I'd ask that my presentation be held to that, but answering specific questions that were asked by the Planning Commission members, you give me a few more minutes, if that's acceptable. Bearing in mind that it's the applicant's burden of proof to prove that we meet the criteria. As noted by staff, this is a proposal for a mixed-use development, 12 single-family detached new lots that would be created on the north side and a little bit on the south side of the extension of Sycamore Street. 31 single-family attached townhouse-type units would be created on the south side of Sycamore Street, and 1 lot for the existing home on the property that will be retained. I'm not sure whether just to dive into the questions. That may make the most sense to try to keep my presentation as brief as possible. Commissioner Mills asked a series of them. I'll try to address them. The turnarounds, L-shaped turnarounds, are per fire district standards. Actually, in my discussion with the fire marshal is the exact term. Anyway, when I spoke with him, he was of the mind at that time, at least, they probably wouldn't require fire truck turnarounds on these things because they essentially function as a fire truck turnaround and pull in and they can back out on the Sycamore. And if that's the case, we would just downsize these to be standard vehicular turnarounds. Otherwise, we would do them per Canby Fire District standards, and they do have a standard that does allow for this general configuration. And we work out the details to Canby Fire standards and their satisfaction. The fire district kind of did change their standards. It used to be that 26 feet allowed for parking on one side, and now they're saying no parking. So this is a new requirement. We have in the development, we're planning on providing single car driveways and a single garage, which meets code requirements. In light of the fact that since we began the design of this project, the no parking on the street has been imposed by Canby Fire. We'll probably be looking at that issue in more detail, but again, remind you that this is just the subdivision phase, subdivision phase of the project, and we will be providing more detail to staff when we get down to the design of the units. I'm talking with the project manager. He said he can provide 3 or maybe even 4 parking spaces on each of these lots, counting the garage and 2 parking across, and maybe even a tandem. So we feel that we can meet standards. Standards, as I said, are only per 16.10 of the code, are only requirement for two parking spaces. I don't believe there's any other requirement anywhere in the code for off-street parking, but we're not trying to shortchange. We're just saying that we will work with staff to make sure that that's addressed when we get down to the actual design of the units. The access to lot 100 was raised as a question. This is primarily a function of grading. If you go to the Redwood Development Concept Plan, there's a map on page 22 of that document, figure 14 sanitary sewer map, and it called for a pump station to be located at the end of the little cul-de-sac that they were showing extended into tax lot 100. Way back when I was first beginning the Redwood Landing projects, we had the pre-application conference, and city engineer said, no, we don't want to have a pump station in any way, shape, or form down in that area to maintain. That triggers the fact that then we're looking at fill in order to get back into the sewer system in Redwood Street. On the area of lot 9 and the adjoining, excuse me, I don't think that's the right number. Get back to the preliminary plan here for a second, excuse me. Area of lots 9 and 10, there's quite a hole in that area of the site where there's a drainage way that goes off towards tax lot 100 surface drainage. And at that point, the grading plan for the project calls for about 8-9 feet of fill. So getting down to tax lot 100 would probably be a grade in excess of like 15%, which doesn't make any sense in that in order to service that area of that site, they will need to do similar filling in order to get the sanitary sewer to flow back out of there without a pump station. So I worked, when I did the Redwood Landing 2 project, I did a shadow plat of the tax lot 100, and it was part of the record, I believe, of that subdivision. It shows how that takes access, or will take access, from the extension of Sycamore Street, and we'll go down there, and there'll be a cul-de-sac that comes down into that area of the tax lot 100 that will provide access in a reasonable fashion without the grading issue that I'm talking about. Question about solar easements. If you look at the site plan for the development, all of the townhouse units are oriented east-west, so there really isn't any potential to, and there's really no way to configure them other than that. I've looked at about every configuration of the site you can look at, and if you're relying on east-west access, it doesn't make any sense to be talking about solar access for those units other than potentially on the roof. And that's up to the developer if they're not going to do that. lots 1 through 9 are all oriented on a north-south axis, and the street will provide adequate protection of solar access to those lots. So there's really no reason to be looking at easements for that, because you've got a 54-foot setback from the street and additional setbacks to the units on the south. So I think solar access for the units that can take advantage of it is taken care of by the site plan itself. Then there was the issue of rear access on 6 building units. We're talking about a distance of 120 feet for that building. The code requirement for the fire code is that you have to be able to get a fire hose within 150 feet of all points of the structure from the street, and they'll be able to do that if they were to pull up along the frontage there. The distance that they're looking at is about, if they go to the middle of the building, you know, it's about, what is that? Just 50, 70, 60, about 120 feet. So they're within code requirements. So given that the fire district did not require it, and I had a conversation with, as I said, with the fire marshal, and you know, we don't do these things without input. And there was no suggestion that we needed to be looking at a rear access for that unit that does have 120 feet of length. And the reason there isn't is because we meet the requirements for how far they can drag a hose. Putting in an alleyway back there would ruin the privacy of those lots. There's just really no reason to do it. The distance in a single family neighborhood, your block length maximum is I think 600 feet. So, you know, it's not unusual for the rear yards of single family developments to be considerable distance from rear access. So for those reasons, it really doesn't make sense. I don't think it would make sense for the planning commission to impose a condition that has should language rather than shall language without some reasonable reason for doing so. In this instance, the fire marshal has been consulted and has not suggested that there's any reason for an alleyway in order to provide adequate fire protection. Let's see. Make sure I covered all those points that you had here. I think that was it. I'd be happy to answer more direct questions at the end of the discussion. Going back to the conditions of approval, looking at the conditions that addressed, let me get back to the right page here. Solar easements, I talked about that. I just don't see where there's any need for them, but we're happy to work with staff, and if they think there's a reason for it, we can certainly discuss it prior to the final plat. So I think condition 1A, the way it reads, gives reason for that discussion, or adequate reason to have that discussion and look at it in more detail prior to final plat. My own personal opinion is that the natural distance between those units that do have a north-south axis and the townhomes provides plenty of distance. And as far as the future extension of streets, as I said, there is a shadow plat that was prepared for tax lot 100 as part of Redwood Landing 2 that the Planning Commission looked at and showed how that area could be developed without having this access from the property. For that reason, I don't think there's a reason for that condition to be imposed. Condition number 18 on page 38 says, is the one about the temporary fire truck turnaround at the end of North Sycamore. I would note that this project will be developed either after or at the same time as the Redwood Landing 2 subdivision, which will have a fire truck turnaround at the north end of Sycamore. So unless there's something unusual that happens that would have this project go first, there's really no reason for that condition to exist, because the turnaround will be provided by Redwood Landing 2. And we're tying into that. I would, if you want to have the condition and simply add a line saying, unless the turnaround is provided in Redwood Landing 2 prior to final plat approval, I think that would be a way to make sure that it's covered without having a condition where we end up with 2 temporary turnarounds. I think that's all of the comments I had. I know I've gone a little more than 5 minutes, so I'll, at this point, turn it back to the commission and be happy to answer your question. I also have with me tonight Mark Hendris and Darren Gusdorf of Icon Construction and Development, and Bruce Goldson of Theta Engineering, who can answer some questions if it becomes appropriate to turn to those folks.
Okay, well, if necessary, we'll refer to your other folks that you have there. Do we have some questions for Mr. Givens? Again, I'll start with you, Jeff, because you seem to have a lot of questions. And
Yeah, John, I guess I'm the resident troublemaker. I had two questions. One is, I think I heard Mr. Givens talk about turnarounds, hammerheads being sized for vehicles rather than for fire equipment. I might have misunderstood that. I asked the question in light of the easternmost driveway or track, which exceeds the fire department's 150-foot max length to not have a turnaround. That's sufficient for them, I believe. That road is going to be like 220 feet long as I measured, unless I'm making a mistake. It looks like it's going to be more than 150. So
I wasn't. I'm sorry.
That was
Are you asking me that question?
My first question is, you are going to provide turnaround on that easternmost driveway track for equipment, correct?
Yeah, the plans we have shown now are for fire truck turnarounds. I'm just saying,
Okay.
Should the fire department decide they don't want them or they want something different, we'll deal with that in the final design.
Okay. And my next one is more of a comment than a question. I guess maybe I misunderstood you, Mr. Givens. I think I heard you say that solar easements are not needed. I think they are needed, but I guess I would say it looks like for the R2 portion of this, they're not possible given the way the facility is laid out. But I feel like, solar easements are a good thing, and they are needed. Whether or not they're possible or not would be the question.
Let me clarify why I was trying to say that I don't think they're needed in this instance. Where solar easements are needed is when where you've got a situation where the units back up to each other, and it's possible for a home built on the south side to be built high enough to block solar access to the one on the north side. In this instance, all of the lots that are oriented for solar, lots 1 through 8, already have a 59-foot separation from the buildings on the south side, plus the setbacks of the buildings. So we're looking at about 75 feet from the front yard, another 20 feet back to the setback line of the homes on those lots. So you're nearly 100 feet from buildings on the south side of Sycamore Street. So there's really no reason to impose an easement in this instance, because the natural setbacks of all those facilities provides for the solar separation and protects the south facade of those buildings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. It makes sense to me, but I guess I'm not worried about the R1.5 portion. I'm worried about the folks that are going to be living in the R2.
Well, there again, I would agree with your statement earlier. I don't think it's possible to make those solar access homes. I mean, solar access to me means that you're going to provide protected sunlight to the south facade of a home. And in this instance, the south facade is an end wall of a townhouse unit. That just simply can't be done in this instance in a reasonable fashion. The only way, as I said, you could potentially make use of solar energy would be solar collectors, and that would be up the developer's choice, because the city doesn't have a requirement for that. So it's not that we're saying that we're not in favor of protecting the south walls. We're saying that existing setbacks protect those lots that are configured for that.
Thank you, Mr. Givens.
Can I interject real quick? This is Eric.
Okay, yes.
So I just I wanted to clear the record a little bit. When I included that item as an informational condition, it is partly because it's in our subdivision standards. And begging your forgiveness, Commission, I learned this morning that this was post the delivery of the staff report, that there was an ordinance 1369, which was adopted in 2013, which essentially struck or abolished any solar easement language from our code. And I was unaware that that ordinance had caused solar easements to be removed from our code language, because as it stands today, it still exists in our subdivision design standards. But Laney let me know this morning that ordinance 1369 essentially removed solar easement requirements from Canby's design standards. And I apologize that that was included in the staff report. I didn't learn about it until today, but it sounds like the background I got from Laney was that the city council decided that they were didn't determine that it was appropriate, or for other reasons removed solar easement standards from the suite of code criteria that we can apply. So I just wanted to clear the record on that a bit. It didn't sound like it was going to be a deal breaker, and but just wanted to make sure that Commission knew that. Maybe Rick knew that as well.
Thank you, Eric. We appreciate that. Any other comments from commissioners? Michael? Do you have any?
I think I have enough information. Thank you.
Okay. Jennifer, do you have enough information?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Boatwright?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. If I left anybody out, and I don't think so. Okay. Are there any other proponents that would like to speak in favor of this project? Laney, do we have any opponents?
No, we don't.
And anybody that is considered neutral? This is one of the downsides of Zoom meetings. I can't see people out there in the audience fidgeting around and wanting to say something in one way or the other. So do we have any other testimony? Maybe I should put it that way, that you know of.
No, we have none.
Okay. Then at this time, I will close the public hearing and open the meeting up for questions for staff or for the applicant. Any more questions for the applicant by the commissioners? Anybody have anything else they'd like to say on that? Okay. Then at this time, I will, bear with me for just a second. Lost my piece of paper here. Then at this time, I will consider a motion to approve the request to subdivide 3 parcels consisting of approximately 4.59 acres into 44 separate legal lots located on North Redwood Street. That would be SUB 20-04 Redwood Landing 3 subdivision.
Where's that at?
I move that we approve SUB 20-04 Redwood Landing 3 subdivision.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 I think we need a little discussion, Mr. Chair, before we
Pardon me?
go. This is not in opposition, but I'm wondering how we're going to handle the conditions of approval as worded. In other words, condition of approval under general process A1 talks about solar easements, which I think we've now heard we probably shouldn't include, but there's an informational condition of approval here for solar easements, and also one for future extensions of streets, which we've discussed a little bit, but I guess I'm looking to staff with the question, should those be removed or altered before we go to approval?
Excellent question, Jeff. Thank you.
It is a good question, Commissioner Mills. I think it certainly makes sense, and it's within the commission's authority to modify those. And what I would suggest is that we strike the solar easements outright, because it's was repealed by ordinance, and that's some code work that we need to do in the background. But that could be stricken from the conditions as part of your motion. And then if the commission is not interested in pursuing the stub extension for the cul-de-sac, we could strike that condition from the approval as well as part of your motion.
Jeff, do you have some thought on that? I agree that they should be stricken from the motion as well.
My only qualifier is I agree they should both be struck, but Eric, I'm looking to staff to give me some assurance that if I strike 1B for future extension, that I am not striking access to lot 100. I think I'm understanding that we'll still have ways to be able to develop those lots with access from another route.
That's correct, Commissioner Mills, and the applicant is also correct in the shadow platting they did that proposes the access into that tax lot. So I do not believe we are removing a vital access point for future development of that tax lot.
So in that case, it leaves us with only under general process informational conditions of approval, item number 2, which is alternative permeable surfaces should be approved by Public Works. I believe we'll want to keep that one, but everything else in section 1 under 1 should be struck, and we should keep number 2 under general process. Is that a fair way to put it?
I think that is a good way to put it, Commissioner Mills.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Chair. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chair Savory. Sorry.
I was going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Jeff. Why don't you go ahead and make your proposal to strike those 2 solar easements.
Yeah, I'll make an amendment. I'll make an amendment to the proposal. I'm not sure if Robert's rules here, so I have to rely on staff to keep me on the straight and narrow. But I'm going to suggest that the conditions of approval stand with the exception of deletion of condition of approval number 1.
Okay.
And that all other conditions of approval as written for SUB 20-04 Redwood Landing 3 subdivision stand with for a vote of approval.
I can't remember who made the original.
I did, Larry.
Does that work for you, Larry?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll
Second.
second again.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Done deal. Good. Thank you, Jeff, for your help on that. Really appreciate it. Okay, let's circle back to the original, request to build a 2-story, 56,000 square foot assisted living facility building with 102 units with a memory care endorsement and 8 cottages on site for independent living that will be in a separate 1-story, 700 square foot duplexes at the corner of 1300 South Ivy Street. That would be DR 20-03 and CUP 20-02 memory care facility. We apparently need to have a vote.
I move that we continue the memory care at 13th and Ivy, CUP 20-02 and DR 20-03 to February 22nd, 2021.
Thank you, Jennifer. You have a
Second,
Thank you.
second, John.
Thank you, Larry. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We will now move on to the final decision on SUB 20-04 Redwood Landing 3 subdivision. So Jeff, would you like to restate for the record, for the final decision, your motion?
Sure. I move that we approve subdivision 20-04 Redwood Landing Phase 3 with the conditions of approval as stated in the, as provided by staff, with the exception that we delete condition of approval number 1.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Larry. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you very much. We move on to items of interest from the planning staff. Laney, what have you got for us there?
I actually only have one, and that is I'd like to wish our senior planner, Ryan Potter, a happy birthday for tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Hopefully he's out celebrating.
He gets the day off.
Nice.
That's good enough.
Okay. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be the 22nd. I will not be here for that meeting as I will be coming out of surgery that day. And so, Larry, this will fall to you to lead that meeting.
Okay, John.
Okay?
Or should we call you the $6 million man?
It's getting to be that way. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I'm not going to be flying through airports. Let's put it that way. Well, I'll set off more metal detectors than you can possibly shake a stick at.
Well, I wish you luck, buddy. Hope you get better soon.
I will. Thank you very much. Any comments for staff from other commissioners? Okay. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned. So
Thank
thank you
you.
very much. Thank
Thanks,
you very
everyone.